The background, I think, that we want everybody to understand is that the Common Core and the standardized testing are being pushed as ways to improve educational opportunity for all kids. But in fact, they are rooted in a very different agenda. And the agenda that they are rooted in is creating a new single education system globally. The assumptions are that workers are going to be competing with one another everywhere in the world, that we have multinational or transnational corporations. And so people have to be educated everywhere in the world to do the same kind of work. And that's the role that PISA, for instance, the PISA tests, that's the role that they play. Larry Keane, who's a researcher for the British Columbia Teachers Federation, did a fascinating study about the origins of the standards that are used in the PISA testing. And for instance, there was a discussion about how they were going to judge literacy. And they decided that they couldn't use literature to judge literacy because literature is too culturally dependent. And the standards had to be global. And I think it's important when we understand global what that means. They don't mean that it's the standard of people who live in Kenya. They mean it's the standard of a Western elite, because they are setting the standards for work and for literacy. There's a cultural component to these tests globally that people really have to understand. Then the other part, when they were having the discussion about what the literacy standards were going to be, how are we going to judge whether people are literate, they decided to use computer manuals. That the reading would be the kind of reading that people do when they're reading computer manuals. So, although the rhetoric that's being used is to make kids college ready, in fact, the reality is we're preparing kids for a world of work over which they will have no control, and most people are going to be trained for jobs that only require the most basic literacy to read a computer manual so that you can repair machinery, so that you can, work in a plant that's making computer chips. That's the first thing that we have to realize about Common Core. The other thing we have to realize about Common Core is that it was developed with money from Bill Gates, and that it's not the opinion of people who were democratically elected to decide what our kids should learn. Nobody gave Bill Gates and the team that he assembled, nobody voted for them to give them the right to decide curriculum. And the same thing is true about standardized tests. The tests are made by for-profit companies and evaluated by for-profit companies, and parents and students and teachers have not had, and citizens, community members, have never had an opportunity to influence what we're testing. Corporations and the powerful elites that run corporations control over what our kids learn. That's the bottom line. Now, what should we do about it? Well, I think that teachers have a very important role to play in modeling what we want in our schools and the way we want decisions to be made about our schools. And I think as a society, we have to discuss what we want from our schools. what we think a well-educated person can do. What does a well-educated person know? And the first step to that, it seems to me, is for the unions to organize a discussion in every school and in every school district talking about what good education looks like, the role of testing in that process, and how those tests should be linked to evaluating good teaching. To me, that discussion has to be the grounding of a movement to take back our schools from the corporations.